the government. You know the narrative very well. The teachers got significant benefits out of that constant and continuous engagement. They ensured that they brought that arrangement to an end. They called the teachers out on strike. The strike lasted for nearly 3 months, and the teachers went back to work, and the strike did not yield more than the government was offering in the first place. In this case, they were unable, apparently, to inveigle themselves between the government here and this union. But trust me, before the end of this week, you will hear the political pronouncements on these very figures, and you will hear the accusations. Just wait and see. You will see what I'm talking about. Among the announcements also is an incentive remunerative regime which incentivizes qualifications of public officers. So you have a regime now in place that accords a specific allowance or that allows a specific payment in relation to acquired qualifications. All of that are in the President's announcements. So I ask you to pay close attention to the public disclosures of the President. It is on the social media, and you will see the details of the increases that will take effect shortly. The election fraud cases are once again in the news. You would have seen again that there is an adjournment, and a date has now been fixed for the 30th of December for the magistrate to determine whether they will have to hear the case ab initio, meaning from the very beginning, or the magistrate will hear the cases with the trial beginning. Recall, these cases have been in the system now for 4 years, and a lot of preliminary legal procedural matters have been heard and determined and disposed of. By the previous magistrate. The contention now is that because this is a new magistrate, all those matters must be gone over from the beginning. There is one school of thought, which is being maintained by the prosecution, that all that needs to go over is the trial itself. And the trial have had 2 or 3 witnesses only. So all you need to do is to restart the trial. The defense lawyers do not wish that to happen. They want the matter to start all over again. I suppose for the charges to be read and for them to again plead all over again. That is their contention. It is all a strategy to delay the hearing of the cases. And that has been the position of the defense team from the beginning. They are afraid to go to trial because the evidence is overwhelming. You are aware of the evidence. You witnessed the crimes being committed firsthand. Many of you. Many of the footages are still available on the social media. Many of the statements are still available on the social media. So what you have is a defense team who would like the trials never to proceed. Obviously, being aware, being afraid of the evidence being presented. So they do not want, they want to derail the trial. And again, the magistrate will have to be formed. Much time have passed already on this matter. This is a matter of public importance. The public is anxiously awaiting the determination of these cases. As I am on the magistracy, let me deal quickly with another issue that has made the news and that has excited public concern. It is the decision of a magistrate to grant a person permission to leave the jurisdiction of Guyana. That person currently is charged with others for a number of serious offenses, appeared before the magistrate and was granted bail. Bail was fixed in a particular sum, and a person acted as the surety, paid that bail. As a result, the defendant was released on bail. Now, it is my respectful contention that a magistrate has no jurisdiction or power to grant permission for a defendant to leave the jurisdiction where that defendant is charged with a criminal offense and has been granted bail. The reason is very simple. When a person is charged, that person is in the custody of the court. The court can do one of three things if the person doesn't plead guilty. If the person pleads not guilty, the next question is the court prepared to try the person? If the court is not prepared to try the person there and then the court has three options available. The court can remand, in which case the custody of the person is handed by the court over to the director of prisons, to be kept by the director of prisons until the next court date. The person is said to be on remand or remanded to the prison. The second option is the court can hand the person over into the custody of a person called the bailor, with that person being required to lodge a sum of money or some form of surety. In that case, the defendant is in the custody of that person in the same way that the defendant is in the custody of the director of prison. The same legal principle applies. Except that here now, you are not confined to the four walls of the prison, but you are given to the custody of the bailor. And the bailor now has an obligation to bring you back to court whenever the court requires you to be there so that you can attend your trial. The third situation is where you are not granted bail or you are not put on remand, but you are allowed to go on your own recognizance. So you're not on bail, you're not on remand, you're free to go. It's only in that third instance, when you're free to go, that you may be permitted to leave the country if you wish. But where you are remanded, obviously you can't leave the country, and when you are remanded in the custody of your bailor, you cannot leave the country either. You cannot leave the jurisdiction of the court. And the magistrate court, being a court of a creature of statute, has no power in the statute, in the legislation, to grant you power to leave the jurisdiction. No magistrate has that power. That is why persons who are granted bail in criminal matters in the magistrate's court are required to go to the High Court for bail, for permission to leave. And why? And where the High Court gets the power? The High Court gets the power from the Constitution of Guyana, because the Constitution of Guyana confers on every citizen freedom of movement, which includes freedom to travel or leave the jurisdiction. And it is that High Court that must give you that freedom under the Constitution to leave the jurisdiction. And in that case, the High Court also stipulates when you are to return, so that you can return to your court, the criminal court, to stand trial. That High Court also can impose conditions that you lodge a property or the title to a property, or you lodge a sum of money that would ensure your return. The magistrate doesn't have those kinds of powers. The High Court only has it because the Constitution gives it those powers. The magistrate, as I said, is a creature of statute. And once you are on bail, once you are out on bail or you granted bail, you have to remain within the jurisdiction of the court. That's the nature of bail. And the magistrate can't permit you beyond that jurisdiction. That power was only given to the High Court by the Constitution of the country. That amended the common law, in essence. We have to understand these concepts, or else we will never get them right. The other thing is that in this very case, the High Court had adjudicated on the question already in relation to the same defendant. And the High Court refused permission to travel. A magistrate ought to have considered him or herself bound by that determination. First of all, the magistrate should not have entertained the application because they had no power to do anything with it other than to reject it. But let us assume that the magistrate had the power. The magistrate ought to have considered him or herself bound by the manner that the High Court treated with the matter, following the doctrine of stare decisis and the doctrine of precedent, because the decision of a higher court binds the decision of a lower court. The CCJ only 2 months ago reinforced and reiterated the importance of this very principle in the case of Sarah Brown and Vikash Ramkissoon against Christopher Jones. Just recently, just 2 months ago. These decisions that, in my view, are so flagrantly in conflict with the law cannot be allowed to stand. The error must be corrected. The record, the public record must be rectified and cleansed of these legal travesty, for want of a better word. You can't leave these decisions in the public record. Future magistrates may follow suit. And where would that put the law? Even if I am wrong, let us say I am wrong, we need to get the issue clarified at a minimum. You cannot leave this law now in this state. So I said last week, let me take a break to see what is going on on the comment section. So I see some comments here that I can't repeat them. So please try to be respectful and not abusive in your comments. Let us be constructive. I said repeatedly that I would like this program to be an educational one. We must learn from each other. That's one of the purpose of this program. It has a political content, and it also, hopefully, have educational content. So, as I said, I was overseas last week, Tuesday, and I led Guyana's delegation at the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force plenary in Jamaica. And first of all, Guyana again did exceedingly well, and we were conferred with an award. We were conferred with an award for the work done in a case that has assumed high prominence in Guyana, the case of Calvin Brutus, related to the matter about which I just spoke. We received an award from the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force because of the work that Guyana has done in relation to that matter. The FIU did a commendable job in tracing the suspicious transactions and reporting them, and then SOCO did an excellent job in investigating the allegations and the reports, and then the Director of Public Prosecutions followed suit with the advice, and the charges came, and the defendants are now in the jurisdiction, are now before the courts in some 240 odd charges. The fact that Guyana exhibited the commitment to go after such a high-ranking member of the law enforcement agency was by itself, or is by itself, considered complimentary by the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force. And this case, and the work being done in this case, is being used as a model for other jurisdictions to emulate. So I want to spend some time to remind you of the road that we have traveled in relation to our anti-money laundering, countering the financing of terrorism sector. Because if we don't reflect upon these roads that we have traveled, if we don't reflect upon the sacrifices which we have made and the challenges that we have overcome, then I don't believe that we would appreciate the accomplishments which we have made. And in this particular area, we have a very interesting story to tell. An interesting story from a political perspective. Now, there is some wise philosopher who once said, if you want to know the true nature of a man, give him power. Every day you listen to the opposition, the APNU and the AFC, and you hear them take all kinds of positions of a high moral nature. They take critical positions and they very aloof positions. They criticize everything that the government does and promise that they can do better. They undertake to do better. That's a promise every day. One slogan of one political party is better must come. And these are the very persons, when they did not get power at the time, they did not have power at the time, governmental power. All they had was a one-seat majority between 2011 and 2015. We were still in the government. All they had was a one-seat majority, the combined AFC and APNU. And what did they use that power to do? We were a minority government. They could have used that power and get us to increase wages and salaries. They could have used that one-seat majority to get us to spend more on the social services, to spend more on our Amerindian communities, to spend more on infrastructure, to spend more on transformative projects, spend more in the healthcare system. You know what they use that one-seat majority to do? To cut every budget for those years. Cut billions of dollars out of it. Not using the one-seat majority to get the government to spend more money so that the people of Guyana will benefit. Not to provide more services to the people of Guyana. Not to pay more salaries to the people of Guyana. They use that one-seat majority to kill the Amaila Falls hydro project, to chop down the specialty hospital, to stop the expansion at the Cherry Jagan International Airport, to vote down the Amerindian Development Fund, to stop all infrastructural work for hinterland airstrips, to cut large ministries' budget to $1, putting public servants on the breadline, cut down the whole Chronicle newspaper budget, the whole NCN budget, the whole DPI. It used to be called GINA, Guyana Information Agency. Cut all those budgets. Guyanese working there, public servants working there, cut those budgets to $1 so that the people can't get paid and the government information system can't run. These are the very people today, when they're out of government, they have no power now, they're promising $5 million a month. And there's no limit to the promise. They promise anything that comes to their head. $1 million a week, oil money. These are the very people that when they had that power, that is what they did. Shut down Amaila Falls, shut down a hospital, a specialty hospital. We would not have blackouts today. That is what they did with their one-seat majority. And these are the persons who today are telling you what and what they will do. Guyanese didn't believe them then, didn't believe that they were so evil then, vote them into power in 2015. Guyanese, although they did all of that, when they were in opposition with their one-seat majority, Guyanese didn't learn, they vote them into government. And from 2015 to 2020, the licks started to come. 7,000 sugar workers knocked off, 200 odd taxes imposed, rice farmers' land seized, land rentals and DNI rates went up by 1,500%. Constitution being trampled upon, rule of law being ignored, and I can go on and on. I have to remind you of these things. I'm not getting to the teeth of elections yet. And these are the same self-righteous people. Today I listen to them. And when I reflect on what they had this country through, at the CFATF plenaries that I attended, I remember those days very well. And Guyanese must remember those days. From 2011 to 2015, until we left government, we were trying to pass the laws to make us compliant with international standards, to save our financial sector from being sanctioned. These people voted down the law. Not once, twice. Voted down laws that are not political in nature, laws that everyone knows were for the benefit of the financial sector. This is international requirements that we must comply with, or else people will stop doing business with us. They voted it down. Voted it down. We took it one time in the parliament. They took it to a select committee where they kept it for nearly 6 months and they didn't pass it. CFATF, the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, had to issue a statement saying that we are posing a risk, and if we don't pass this legislation, they will have to advise their member states to stop doing business with Guyana, because we are going to be sanctioned internationally. Because if you don't pass this legislation, it means that your economy is engaged in money laundering and terrorism. That's why the thing is called anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism. That is international rubric. And if you don't pass these laws, then you are deemed to be engaged in those activities. And once you are engaged in those activities, then nobody wants to deal with you. All the banks will stop. And they did that to Guyana. They did that. We put the law in a second time in the parliament. Again, they took it to a select committee and they voted down again after a couple months. Go back, I have all it written here. I'll publish a paper of the journey that we traveled. From being a pariah state under the AML-CFT international regime to being an award-winning state now. That's what they put us. We were sanctioned by the international community. We were sanctioned by the International Financial Action Task Force. We were sanctioned. Correspondent banks severed relationship with us. You couldn't send money to Guyana from overseas. We couldn't get foreign exchanges. All our relationship with the international financial institutions were put on hold. All the IFIs. They were grinding this country, grinding it to a halt. That is what they use their one-seat majority to do. I have here the private sector begged. The Georgetown Chamber of Commerce begged them. The Aircraft Owners of Association begged them. The Guyana Bankers Association begged them. The Guyana Manufacturing Services Association begged them. I have all the statements here of what they put this country through. The CFATF, the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, sent a delegation here to say, look, you have to pass this thing. We don't care about your political differences in the country. CARICOM issued a statement. CARICOM issued a statement to say, If you don't pass this, you're going to affect the entire CARICOM region because you're going to be a blacklisted territory within the region. You're going to threaten the financial services and the financial sector of all of our jurisdictions, all the countries in CARICOM. They ignored all of that. I have a statement here from a bank out of Jamaica. The Jamaica National Building Society General Manager issued a statement in February 2014. UNASUR, the Union of South American Nations, issued a statement. All of these organizations in the region and locally begged these people to support the legislation. 2 bills we had in the parliament. After they voted one down, we will come back with another one. Never did it. They caused us to be blacklisted. And these are the very individuals now who are asking for power again. You have to reflect on these matters. I traveled that road with you to show you how we have moved Guyana from sanctions to award winning. That's where Guyana has moved in a few short years. And why we were sanctioned? Because APNU, AFC put us there. And why? All they had to do was to support a law, support a bill that had nothing to do with politics, but only national interest. But they used their political one-seat majority to hold this country to political ransom. Ramjatan, as leader of the AFC, was making all kinds of crazy demands. And so was APNU, AFC. That's what they had this country in. Turmoil, agony for 3 years on this issue. And these are the people. The same Nigel Hughes, he was right there. Where was he? He was very much part of the AFC. Today, he wants you to believe that he's a miracle worker. He dropped from heaven. He's very much tainted and tarnished as his other confederates. That is what they did when they had power. And all they did when they got into government on this issue, all they did was to pass the very law that we had already drafted. That's all they did. They passed, of course, they passed some other laws that put us in problems too. I'll deal with that later. But all they did, the first couple of months that they got into office, they passed the 2 bills that they voted down, and then they claimed victory. They said that they pulled Guyana away from the blacklisting, when the whole country knows that they put Guyana into the dungeons. And what did we do in opposition when they were in the government? We supported the bills. That is what we did in government. In opposition, we supported the bills. You know why? Because they were important to Guyana. And when they brought additional bills, we supported them as well, but we were critical of them. We supported them, but we were critical of them. And when we got back into government, we have been changing them since. And that is why, in the 4th round of mutual evaluation, Guyana came out at the top of the independent Caribbean jurisdictions. Guyana came out at the top of the independent Caribbean jurisdictions in the last mutual evaluation done, the fourth round. Two other countries scored higher than Guyana. They were Bermuda and Anguilla, and they are two British overseas territories. They're not independent Caribbean territories. Check the ratings that Guyana received, and you will see that Guyana topped in the independent Caribbean territories. That is the work that we have done in the AML CFT sector from 2020 to now. 4 short years. If we don't tell this story, nobody will tell it for us. And that's why tonight I decided to spend some time to remind Guyanese of the torture, agony, and anguish that these born again put us through